So first, we want to understand the drivers of regulatory reform. We have discussed this in the past, and it bears repeating that this low ranking in various governance and competitive indices has driven the country to really go for regulatory reform. And one other reason is that the inclusive growth agenda with jobs as a goal could be realized by doing policy and regulatory reforms to unlock investment constraint. There are two case studies here, one on the macro level, this is the case of the National Competitiveness Council, and the other one is the case study of a local government. In this National Competitiveness Council case study, we want to highlight the establishment of that NCC as a formal body by way of government's executive order. And the second point that we want to make is this critical collaboration between the public and private sector in driving regulatory reforms. Driven because of the perceived lack of serious commitment and action in the past, action to reform in the past, but this time with better governance at the highest level of government upon the assumption of President Aquino to power, we see here a stronger collaboration and partnership between the public and private sectors in improving competitiveness. So that's the role that has been vested on the National Competitiveness Council. They do track the different indices and bear their efforts on improving certain various components of the indices. And the way to do that is for the government to create several working groups, work on logistics, budget transparency, education, national single window, to name a few. So what they did was to map out what constrains the investment climate, what increases the level of the cost of doing business in the country, and really make these technical working groups composed of public and private sector to identify the reforms and go for the improvements. You have this from Derek, so what I did was to fill up the elements table and try to identify which are the significant and insignificant elements. In this case of the NCC, I rated big policy as significant. Sorry if you cannot see that here in the screen, it's in the handout. And so down the line, little and big legal policy, I said it's very significant and there's an explanation. Decision-making support, there's direct access by the Trade Secretary to the President. I think that's very important in a country like the Philippines, where the President has many competing interests to attend to. And with the business sector behind the Trade Secretary, you could expect reforms being accomplished simply because there's somebody there with focus and with the right direction. Now, when we go to change implementation, not very significant. There was, in my perception, no such plan. And the weak area would be, of course, the administration and enforcement. It's not very significant. Monitoring and review, I said, it's not very significant. And to sum up, the significant elements would be dialogues, workshops. We made very good use of it. Analysis of indicators by the NCC. They continuously go over the various indices and try to find out constraining elements. Establishment of the website was for the sake of transparency for the public and different publics, different stakeholders to find out the status of regulatory reforms. With respect to lead institution and coordinating institution, for the lead you have the Department of Trade and Industry, and of course supported by the NCC, and as a coordinating body, the NCC. So, in the paper I said, well, what's happening in the Philippines is that we have the elements of a regulatory management system. But we haven't put them together formally to have one such as what we might have, such as what we have in the case of Malaysia. And Pons was suggesting even that the NCC could function as the PEMUDA, but it would take a lot of push, to transform the NCC into the PEMUDA. The thing is, the NCC has shown its potential and has really shown some capacity for driving the reforms. In the case of the Quezon City, it is the business process, permits and licensing system. Quezon City was ranked very low relative to 25 other cities in terms of obtaining construction permits, registering a property. And enterprises wanting to locate in the city have to secure numerous clearances, and you go through a labyrinth of offices just to secure the permits that you would need to operate locally. So what they did was to simplify the business permit and licensing system in consultation with the NCC. So the message is that there's a tie-up between what policymakers and bureaucrats at the national level want to happen and how this will happen at the local level. Businesses locate in the local governments. The big policies are done at the national level, the policymakers, legislators, but businesses locating in the local level will confront not only national policies and regulations, but as well local government regulations, rules and regulations. And we have to ensure that there will be ease in doing business not only at the national level but also at the local level. So, okay, this just captures what's been done. It's not in the handout. It's a recent addition. Thanks to Roy, but it came 2 days before. So from 34 days, the old process, we're down to processes being completed in 8 days. This is a summary of the different steps, simplified steps that businesses will face when you go to Quezon City to register your business, to get the permits and license. Elements table. Okay, conclusion. Okay, process undertaken by NCC in regulatory reform. We made very extensive use of dialogues, consultations, working groups, construction of competitiveness index, other analysis of competitiveness indices, better public-private sector collaboration and stronger advocacy efforts, participation by different stakeholders, represented in the different working groups that I flashed on the screen earlier, and a feedback mechanism on the reform efforts. These are very important elements of the regulatory reform process in the country. In the Quezon City case, there's a long recognized need to reduce cost of doing business in the city, and it helps that the local chief executive himself, the mayor, is practically involved in reforming the business permitting process, licensing system in the city. So he issued executive orders, created a one-stop shop business center, and linked to the Philippine Business Registry. This link led to the reduction in the number of steps and requirements for business permits and licenses. Derek asked for some reflection. So Philippines doesn't have a regulatory management system, as I said earlier, but you have the basic elements of a regulatory management system. To have a requisite RMS, political will must be exercised by the highest leadership in government. NCC could be an important element in the requisite regulatory management system. And there's need for more systematic and empirical approaches, such as RIA. We don't do that yet. Although there are, of course, when you talk to the regulatory agencies, they will claim that they do conduct cost-benefit analysis. But a formal RIA and formal notices such as RIS, these are absent in the Philippine regulatory system. So based on the experience of Quezon City, streamlining the business permits and licensing system, this is replicable in other LGUs. But there would be need to calculate on savings and avoidable costs as next step. We need to, if we want to convince other LGUs to follow suit, then it will be to our advantage to have this kind of calculations to show that it really pays to reform regulation. Now, I will underscore also the critical role of the private sector, civil society, and media in pushing for a requisite RMS. So the use of media has been astutely made by NCC to advance regulatory reforms. Thank you.